I have just like kind of one more little space news thing that I want to just talk about kind of casually. It was just a fun little discussion here. And this was, it started off with Eric Berger from Ars Technica having a little interesting quibbit about Roscosmos and Russia's Dmitry Rogozin, who basically said he had just had some interesting things to say about Crew Dragon. But what Elon's response to it was saying that Elon wanted to credit the Soviet Union and Russian engines in the 80s as being a factor in deciding to switch between pursuing hydrogen for the Raptor to CH4, so methane. So basically saying they demonstrated excellent performance on test stands with specific impulse up to 380 seconds. And then he said, combined with SpaceX deep subcooling propellants to near liquefaction. There we go. Type of N2. Use of a common dome. So basically having just one dome and not needing to have all the basically saying like and a higher thrust to weight ratio of other engines. He likes it better than hydrogen. And so I asked him whatever happened to the Raptor upper stage, because Raptor was originally had a lot of money being developed for an upper stage with the Air Force for the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. They were developing Raptor for that program like a long time ago. And I just kind of put some assumptions. I assume it's higher thrust to weight ratio and higher minimum throttle would crush about any payload, because the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy is already like super overpowered. They have to throttle it way down as the tank gets empty. Otherwise, they're just like crush, have like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Gs of acceleration and just be crushing whatever payload is putting into space. So the Merlin 1D's vacuum is already pretty overpowered for upper stage. And the Raptor is twice as powerful as the Merlin 1D and can't throttle as deep. So a Raptor engine would minimum, like near the end of a stage, be pushing like 6 to 10 Gs or something. So that was my assumption as why it wouldn't be worth it. Besides the extra complexity, because now you have to have a different fuel at your launch pad. You have to have a different manufacturing line. You have to have all these different things just for a little extra performance. Is it worth it, basically? And that turned into a different discussion. But where was the... this is kind of fun here. This just a tinker... John Gardy said, folks don't realize the mass penalty using hydrogen as rocket fuel. The space shuttle's external fuel tank carried about 4 times the volume of liquid hydrogen than its liquid oxygen. Hydrogen is light, but takes room that equates to larger tanks. Liquid methane takes much less room. And Elon said, also installation of deep cryo is heavy and prone to leaks. There's something that was really cool here where, sorry, I'm just browsing Twitter just for fun.
That's where we are now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, here we go. This was a fun one then.
We've achieved CNN level of quality.
This is basically what the pros do, so why not?
Yeah. So I know I added this. I said, I know you'd never add unnecessary complexity in the manufacturing line, but I'm still surprised that SpaceX never made a Merlin vacuum engine get closer to that 380 mark with RP1, and by making a closed cycle Merlin vacuum engine. And Elon said they could never reach 380 seconds of specific, so how efficient the engine is with RP1 and kerosene. Going on to say CH4 has higher potential maximum theoretical impulse. But even in practice, with CH4, you can reach about 99% of max theoretical combustion efficiency, and RP1 is only about 97% on a good day and requires desuiting of turbines between flights. And then Elon said, important technical note, due to higher oxygen fuel ratios of CH4 versus RP1, oxygen is dense, and significant density increase of subcooled CH4, plus no common dome insulation needed, plus cryo strength bump of CH4, tank mass of CH4 and O2 stage, almost the same as RP1. Don't worry, I've got you guys covered as to what all that means. And it's this. So basically, this is a trade-off. This is in my Raptor engine video. But here's what all of this is talking about. This all started because Elon was originally looking at using Elon and SpaceX were originally looking at using hydrogen for the Raptor engine. And currently, the Merlin engine uses RP1, which is shown on the left here. So if you're listening, sorry, I have a chart here that I pulled up, and what this is showing here is your relative tank sizes. So with RP1, the tank is for liquid oxygen is about twice as big as the tank for RP1. Now this is might be a little bit confusing because liquid oxygen is actually more dense. There's more grams per liter liquid oxygen than RP1. So it's significantly more dense, 1,141 grams per liter as opposed to 813. So a good, 30, 40% difference or whatever. But the difference is that you need to burn it at a 2.7 to 1 ratio. So there's 2.7 grams of liquid oxygen being burned for every gram of RP1. So that's your oxidizer to fuel burn ratio. This is the same with our cars. Our cars run, you have a fuel oxide, you have a ratio there. And it's not the same as the stoichiometric ratio. So you can have like the perfect burn of a chemical is considered the stoichiometric burn ratio. So, if you're burning RP1 to perfectly burn it in the most efficient manner possible, it's going to have a certain burn ratio, right? And it might be like 2, units of RP1 to 1 oxidizer, whatever it is. I don't know what the stoichiometric ratio is. But basically, rocket scientists need to be able to figure out an optimized fuel to burn ratio that maximizes the efficiency, keeps temperature under control, and also maximizes ejection velocity and mass flow as well. So when we get into all this, when we factor it all in, sorry, this is like the weirdest lesson on stuff ever. What happens is when you look over here at hydrogen on the far right, its burn ratio is 6 to 1. There's 6 grams of oxygen to 1 gram of hydrogen, but hydrogen is so lightweight. It's 71 grams per liter. So the hydrogen tank, despite burning 6 times more oxygen than hydrogen in the engine, the tank to carry hydrogen is still going to be 2.7 times bigger than your oxygen tank for a hydrogen rocket. That's why the hydrogen rocket tank engines or rockets that use hydrogen, the tanks are huge. The rocket looks a lot bigger than it is. The Delta IV looks massive because its hydrogen tank is so big, but really it's not carrying that much mass. It's really not that heavy of a rocket because most of it is just hydrogen. Now, methane sits right in the middle. Methane is really interesting because even though it's half as dense as RP1 as far as its actual density, because they burn it at a higher oxygen to fuel ratio. So instead of 2.7 to 1, it's 3.7 to 1. So it ends up being your liquid methane tank is almost the same size. It's closer to the same size as your oxygen tank. So it's your oxygen tank for one, if you had like 1 unit of oxygen, you need 0.73 size methane tank. So the tanks are almost the same size between your liquid oxygen and your liquid methane. And their temperatures are almost the same too. So liquid methane and liquid oxygen are very close relatively in temperature. They're both around that 180 degrees Celsius mark or so. So it just makes there's a lot of trade-offs here. And it's just really interesting just reading through all this stuff again with Elon. It's just kind of a fun little conversation about all that stuff. I just find this stuff really fascinating that this is where it proves that Elon is not just a talking head of SpaceX, that he knows what he's talking about, that he understands the rocket science, understands the trade-offs, the benefits, the pros, the cons, and all the fun things. So sorry, that was a massive rant on oxidizer to fuel ratios and the different liquid fuels, but there you go.
Well, I think that's why Elon likes talking to you, because that's what he nerds out on.
Yeah.
Like, I think he would rather spend his time, problem solving stuff like that than anything else. And talking to you.
And talking about efficient use of capital and balance sheets is probably not.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I think, I used to say with photography that photography is a compromise. No matter what you do in photography, there's always a trade-off. Especially when the physical thing of the holy trinity between aperture, ISO, shutter speed, change any one of those things and you're going to get a trade-off in something else, right? You're going to increase motion blur or increase or decrease depth of field, increase or decrease noise. There's always a trade-off. And even when you get to the level of price, there's always a compromise. do you want to spend $3,000 on a lens, or will a $400 lens accomplish 99% of the work as the $3,000 lens, right? And rockets are the exact same thing. And again, when talking with Peter Beck, I think he's honestly a master at learning the fine compromises of like, does this do 99% of the work at half the cost? You know, because that's the whole thing with Rocket Lab that they've done so impressively is create an orbital rocket with a low risk path forward. It's not the highest performing rocket. It's not that high it doesn't put that much into low Earth orbit, only 225 kilograms maximum payload. But they did it in such a beautiful way, just balancing their compromises to be able to produce something safely and really roll out a rocket in a hurry, really. And I think that's the stuff that Elon likes. I think Elon loves that balance sheet where those lines cross in your compromises of like, and this is the right decision here, this is the right decision here. But the thing with the rockets is like, there's thousands of those converging lines of decisions, and changing one changes everything. And that's the whole beauty of engineering, really, especially on rockets, is just there's massive changes with the tiniest little tweaks in decisions.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry, that was...
I would like to remind everybody that, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, you were just a photographer that had a space flight suit that was going to take some pictures, and now you're this.
In 2014, I knew nothing about rockets.
Yeah.
Like, literally couldn't hardly told you the difference between I could point to a space shuttle and say that's a space shuttle, and point to Saturn V and say that's a Saturn V. And that was pretty much it, literally.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this clip from our show. If that's just not enough for you and you want to watch the full episode, you can go to olfpod.com/YT.
And if you want more from us, you can consider becoming a Patreon member. You'll get early access to episodes. You can join our awesome community. You can actually watch us record live and get your name in the credits by going to olfpod.com/Patreon.
So thanks everyone for watching. Check back every Friday for new clips here and new episodes on the main channel.
Thanks, everybody.